The power behind the president. Power is usually imagined as visible, a signature on a document, a speech from a podium, a decision announced to the world. But inside the White House, some of the most powerful forces never appear in public at all. This matters because the presidency does not operate in isolation. Every decision is shaped long before it reaches the president's desk, by relationships built over time, by trust earned quietly, by access granted without ceremony. The result is a form of power that does not command 97 but influences. Behind every president stands a network of individuals who rarely appear in headlines: chiefs of staff, senior aides, strategists, gatekeepers. Their authority is not defined by law, but by proximity. They decide what information rises, what urgency is emphasized, what risks are softened, and in doing so, they shape reality itself. At first, the system feels necessary. No president can process everything. The volume of information alone makes filtering unavoidable. Someone has to prioritize. Someone has to frame. That role becomes powerful not because it seeks control, but because it manages attention. Over time, patterns form. Certain voices are trusted more than others. Certain interpretations become default. The president begins each day already guided toward specific conclusions, not through manipulation, but through structure. This is how power behind the president takes shape. 97 quietly, efficiently, invisibly. The danger is not corruption. It is concentration. When influence flows through too few channels, perspective narrows. Blind spots grow. Decisions begin to reflect not the full complexity of reality, but the version most easily delivered under pressure. The president may still decide, but the field of choice has already been shaped. Options excluded early are rarely reconsidered later. What feels like decisive leadership can sometimes be the product of unseen constraint. This is the story of power that never signs orders and never stands at microphones. Power that operates through access, framing, and timing. Power that shapes history without ever claiming responsibility for it. Because the most influential force in the White House is not always the one the public sees. It is the one standing just behind the president. That power grows strongest when pressure increases. In moments of crisis, the president must move faster, decide with less information, and rely more heavily on trusted filters. The people closest to the decision become even more influential, 97 not by intent, but by necessity. Inside the White House, proximity becomes currency. The aide who arrives first in the morning, the advisor who stays late into the night, the one who understands the president's instincts well enough to anticipate questions before they are asked. Over time, these figures stop merely supporting decisions and begin shaping the environment in which decisions are made. What makes this power so effective is its subtlety. It does not argue loudly or impose will. It organizes reality. Briefings are structured in a particular order. Risks are ranked. Language is chosen carefully. By the time the president engages, the contours of the decision are already defined. Other advisors feel this shift. Some adapt by aligning their recommendations with the dominant framing. Others withdraw, sensing that alternative perspectives no longer land with the same force. Diversity of thought narrows, not through exclusion, but through efficiency. The system rewards what fits. The president rarely notices this transition happening. From the inside, it feels like clarity, fewer conflicting voices, faster consensus, decisions that seem decisive rather than bogged down. But clarity achieved this way can mask loss of dissent, loss of warning, loss of options that never reach the room. This matters because power without visibility resists correction. When outcomes succeed, credit flows upward. When they fail, responsibility does the same. The forces that shape the decision remain in place, unexamined, ready to influence the next moment. As the administration moves forward, the gap between authority and influence widens. The president commands, but the power behind the president guides. And when those two drift too far apart, leadership becomes vulnerable, 97 not to conspiracy, but to blind spots no one intended to create. The question is not whether power behind the president exists. It always does. The question is whether it remains balanced or whether it quietly becomes decisive. Because when influence operates unchecked, it does more than support leadership. It begins to define it. The conflict emerges when influence behind the president begins to outpace accountability, not through ambition, but through momentum. Decisions start reflecting the architecture of access rather than the full range of available judgment. What reaches the desk feels complete, even when it is not. Advisors sense the imbalance when their concerns arrive too late, when warnings are acknowledged politely but never integrated, when alternatives are treated as complications rather than considerations. Over time, dissent becomes inefficient, and inefficiency in a system under pressure is quietly discouraged. The president experiences this as coherence, fewer surprises, smoother execution, a sense that the administration is finally moving in sync. But coherence without friction can become dangerous. It removes the resistance that exposes error before it hardens into consequence. The real conflict is not personal. It is structural. Power behind the president is rarely challenged because it feels earned. It comes from trust, loyalty, and shared experience. Questioning it feels like questioning competence itself. And so the system protects the very influence that may be narrowing vision. Tension rises when outcomes begin to diverge from expectation. A policy underperforms. A reaction surprises. A blind spot becomes visible in hindsight. Advisors trace the decision path and realize certain frames were never contested. Certain assumptions were never tested. Influence did not cause the failure, 97, but it shaped the conditions that allowed it. At this point, leadership faces an uncomfortable reckoning. The problem is not one person or one office. It is the way power has concentrated around access. Correcting it means reintroducing friction, slowing processes that feel efficient, inviting perspectives that complicate momentum. The conflict reaches its peak when the president recognizes the trade-off clearly: preserve a system that feels smooth or disrupt it to regain depth. Efficiency versus resilience, speed versus perspective. The choice is not obvious because both carry cost. Silence fills the room, 97, not from uncertainty, but from recognition. Power behind the president has reached a point where it must either be balanced or it will continue shaping outcomes unchecked. And in that moment, leadership is tested not by decisiveness, but by willingness to complicate its own comfort. Because true authority is not threatened by influence. It is threatened by influence that no longer sees itself. The resolution comes through intention, not confrontation. The president does not dismantle the structure of influence. Instead, it is widened. New channels are opened. Competing briefings are encouraged. Access is redistributed, not to weaken trust, but to strengthen perspective. Inside the White House, the change is immediate but measured. Meetings become more complex. Decisions take longer. Disagreement returns, 97, not as dysfunction, but as signal. The system regains the ability to challenge itself before reality does. The power behind the president remains, but it no longer operates alone. Its role shifts from gatekeeper to contributor. Influence is shared across a broader field, making blind spots harder to sustain. The president's authority becomes more grounded, not less. This adjustment rarely attracts attention. There is no public acknowledgement, no visible shakeup. And yet, it may be one of the most consequential acts of leadership, not asserting control, but designing balance, not eliminating influence, but preventing it from becoming invisible governance. The lesson is not that influence is dangerous. It is that unchecked influence is fragile. It depends on comfort, not resilience. And resilience requires friction, 97, the kind that reveals weakness before it becomes collapse. The power behind the president did not disappear. It was placed back into proportion. And in doing so, the presidency regained something essential: not speed, not simplicity, perspective. Because leadership is not about eliminating unseen forces. It is about ensuring none of them are allowed to shape history alone. Subscribe to join the journey. The power